you beautiful awakened dieters, and welcome to another Space and Time with me. My name is Gabriel Lugo, and here I talk from self to self. Today I'm going to continue from the same session or channeling of the December 28th, 2019 transcript available in LNL Research. This is a good moment for you to know that every one of these channelings that I read are available for free for you to read and check out the full session of channeling. Now that I'm talking about this, I think it's a good moment to refresh and remember that the difference between this channeling and the raw contact channeling, which I am mostly known for talking about, is that this is called conscious channeling, meaning that the channels are conscious of the information that is being given to them, whereas the raw contact was an unconscious channeling, the only one that we are aware of, and the one that stands out, of course, because of the quality of the information provided there. So just a key distinction there. Again, you can find this in conscious channeling in LNL Research. Links always in the description of the YouTube notes. So with that, today we're going to talk about the controversial topic of eating meat. Is it spiritual? Is it not? What is the deal with eating meat? And I will give my own opinions as I go through what Quo says, and of course my own experience and thoughts about this whole dilemma. So let's get into Austin's question. In fact, this Austin asking a question for somebody called Lanny. And again, this is about 2/3 into the channeling. It's just simple other questions that are asked by other people. People write their questions to LNL Research, and sometimes they ask them to Quo. So that's a pretty cool thing that they do. So if you're interested, you can write them a question and Quo may answer. In any case, Austin says, we have another one from Lanny that is in 2 parts. I will ask the first part first. Quo, I would like to ask a question about eating meat. What are the spiritual principles and possibilities of polarization as one attempts to eliminate the use of animal products from their diet? When the reality of the situation is looked at, we have one set of beings expressing its dominance over another set of beings, and from what I can tell are infringing on the free will of these beings as they live a life in which they are caged and grown just to be killed for meat. When we have the option to be steward of the planet and treat every being with respect and dignity, can you help enlighten me on this? Do second density beings incarnate in the understanding that they will live this kind of life and therefore we are not infringing on their free will? Or does each person make their choice, if they are even aware as to whether they will take part in this? So before I get into the answer of Quo, this is a good point to remind you that this question and answer is, of course, permeated with the Confederation's language, meaning that if you're not familiar for whatever reason with polarization and free will and your choice and infringing upon this free will, then hopefully this makes sense to you, because you don't need too much of a sophisticated language to understand what this means, and I'll try to go with it as much as possible in the common understanding of what this means. But I guess my point here, or my clarification, is for you, the listener, to be aware that this is not the common spiritual conversation about eating meat is spiritual, eating meat is not spiritual, and so on. It goes a little bit deeper and beyond that. So another thing that I would say about the question is that it's actually very well formulated, because it's taken into consideration that first, there is a group of people who are in essence expressing their dominance over the second density beings, in this case the animals, simply to raise them for food. And the question is if we are infringing upon their free will, or if they actually incarnate with the idea that, yep, that's my experience, I'm going to be raised and killed for food, or if we are infringing upon their free will. And there is a lot of wisdom in what Quo says, so I won't delay this anymore and go straight into it. Quo says, I am Quo and am aware of the query, my brother. This is a query which moves to the level of understanding that all is one. The animals, as you call them, of the second density variety, which are utilized by many on the surface of your third density planet for food, are beings that have consciousness, that have a soul, that have the ability to give and to receive love. These entities then can be utilized by those of the third density in any way that third density entities choose. This choosing is done in a conscious manner when the second density entity that is to be consumed as food is asked before its slaughter, shall we say, if this is acceptable to such entity. This is a situation in which many of the native tribes, shall we say, of your earthly sphere have long engaged in the utilizing of the second density animals for their food. However, we can find that it is seldom utilized in your third density at this time, and it is more likely to be taken for granted that such second density entities have been grown for this purpose and would consider it a part of their life experience to give their lives and their bodies for food. However, this cannot be known for certain until there has been a communication established between the third density entity and the second density entity that is seen as a potential source of food. So let's make a pause here and take step by step, paragraph by paragraph, what Quo is saying. First of all, their highlight and their beginning is, of course, something that shouldn't be ignored. Even though we hear this way too often from the Confederation that all is one, I think it's especially important when they mention it as the way they're doing it now, because it gives that emphasis, or at least that focus, into what this really means, that we are all one. So they say first that the animals of the second density variety, because there are different second densities, it's plants, crystals, and even places could be considered second density entities. I'll talk about that in a little bit. So they're utilized in the third density planet, or planet for food. They have consciousness and they have a soul. Most importantly, they have the ability to give and to receive love. This is my own view of things, and we don't have to agree on this, but I have a view that there are different strata of second density expression, and this is why I love that they started with the reminder that this goes actually to straight into the understanding that all is one. Now, all is one, however, this one is in evolution, and it needs itself to continue to evolve as a part of the self. That means all the densities of consciousness, of course, all the different materials that create this physical illusion that we live in. And so these materials, of course, have different strata. Like I said, the dirt has a very primitive form of consciousness. And if I can be, this is an arbitrary view, of course, again, we don't have to agree on this, but I believe that the soil, for example, being sort of first density, is a very primitive form of consciousness. When we get into the movement and growth, which is the second density, then plants and animals come into existence. And this is what differentiates them from first density, from the mineral form and water and fire and air. These are the four elements of first density. But now there seems to be a sentient form that is moving and growing. This is a lot more advanced than the first density, of course. But within this second density, there are substrata of this consciousness. Again, we're going from the point of view that all is one. It's one consciousness moving within itself. And so this strata, to me, is a lot more discernible to the human eye as the ability to empathize and relate to the loving experience that is dynamically established between the human and the entity. In this case, plants and animals are at the highest part of this strata, and even within the animals, I would say with a very strong certainty that there are different types of subconsciousness between second densities. Let me explain this. There is, say, an amoeba or a worm, which are sort of very primitive second density consciousness. And then there are, say, dolphins, cows, dogs, and even ravens who exhibit these raccoons. I mean, so many animals that are very, very intelligent. And this is, of course, a view of the third density entity, of us humans. We are the judges. And so I believe, and again, this is just basing in my view on all of this, that the closer second density animals are to us, then the more related we are to them. That just seems obvious to us. I personally would feel very strange raising monkeys to kill them for food, let alone, of course, humans, which is known to happen between certain communities and tribes, and cannibalism is nothing new. But there is a sort of grim aspect to it. And so where we draw the line is completely individual, and I would say that. But we must not ignore that relatedness that we find with other humans, with monkeys, with pigs, with dogs, with chickens, anything. So to me, it's completely individual where we draw the line, but we must understand that we are in a relationship with these second density animals. And so when Quo says that they have an ability to give and receive love, I know some people may disagree with me, but it is quite difficult for me to look at plants in general. Some plants have a very strong relationship with humans, and this is why, again, I summon the previous words that I said before, that everybody must draw the line where they seem it fit. Where is the difference between, say, plants and an animal that we can feel the love, that love expressed by an animal, compared to a plant? It's very noticeable for us humans. I think most of us will agree that there is a huge difference. So what we choose to eat is dependent upon our own view. That's what I'm trying to say. That ability to give and receive love, it is our relatedness to them. Okay, so they continue and say that these entities can be utilized. Of course, it's our choosing if we can use them for food or not. And they do say something really important too, because this is not, of course, I have no ideals here. I have no agenda, quite honestly. But something that, again, it needs to be pointed out is that our cultures in the past used to have a sort of ritual and understanding with the animals before slaughter. There are so many traditions that express this reverence for animals, and they hold them as spiritual animals even. So some of them, before the slaughter, there is a sort of blessing. This is what kosher is supposed to be, although I'm pretty sure this is not exactly what is being now used in when something is called kosher. I mean, no offense to anybody, but of course there's always a watering down of the tradition, only to conform with the guidelines that have been given, and the emotional part is completely lost. This is nothing new, of course, and so Quo actually recognizes this and says that, you know, this is an appropriate way to eat meat. This is an appropriate way to not eat meat, but to at least to relate to the consciousness that is behind there. It's the same consciousness as you. There's nothing, you're not killing another god or something, but at least to recognize this. And the vast majority of us in third density, us humans, completely ignore this, and we simply eat because we want to eat. And so the raising of food is just is a chore. It's a chore that we need to go through and let other people do it for us, is what we say, right? I'm guilty of that, of course, but that's just the system in which we live. And so in the last part they say that we cannot know for certain if the animal itself has chosen this, unless there is a communication established between the third density entity, that's us humans, and the second density entity, which is the animal to be slaughtered for food. So a communication is what they suggest that must happen, and this is what the tribes of our, at least not all tribes of course, but some traditions have emphasized this communication with animals and to ask permission for food, in essence. So I'll continue reading because there's more. Quo continues and says, therefore, we find that for most entities within the third density who consume the meat products without such an establishment of communication beforehand are in some way infringing upon the free will of the second density entities. However, we would remind each third density being that it is quite frequently accomplished, shall we say, that the infringement upon the free will of others is put forth or done in many and various ways on a daily basis, so that there is the need for each third density entity to balance the catalyst of such infringement upon the free will of other entities, be they second or third density entities. This is one of the things that I love about Quo and any other Confederation information, is that they address one side and the other. They're addressing the reality that when we slaughter animals for food without asking their permission or simply establishing that communication and saying, listen, I want to eat you for whatever reason, because it's fun, because you're tasty, because I'm hungry, or because I need to feed my family, whatever it is, without that communication, the recognition of yourself, you're transmuting a part of yourself into yourself and your family, right? So we are infringing upon their free will by killing them and saying simply, well, you know, you're just part of this industry and we must eat you because that's just how it is. And that's how we go about our business. However, Quo is reminding us that we also infringe on free will very often. So basically, infringing upon the free will of the animal is not something that is, should I call it sinful? Should I call it negative? Just simply a reminder that it's not the only way in which we infringe free will on this planet. We do it quite often with other people, and this is what Quo is saying. So take that into consideration. The more you consider other third density beings, humans, and this is why, forget about the diet dilemma and the meat consumption, everything else. Concentrate on your fellow humans. See how you infringe on their free will, which I won't mention here because it would become too long, but consider that. Sit in silence for a second and see how you infringe on other people's will, free will. Then, maybe then, and I'm sure it will, your relationship with second density will change. It's just an automatic thing. It's simply, this is how it happens. Let me put it that way. We cannot, and this is how it's sometimes, again, I don't mean it in a derisive way, but it's laughable sometimes to see the movements that are promoted infringing on humans' free will, because we need to stop infringing on second density's will. So that just doesn't make sense. We first have to start with ourselves. Then we extrapolate to other humans, and finally it naturally happens to everything else. This is, again, my point of view. It doesn't have to be this way, but that is just my 2 cents there. So that's a very important point to me. So Quo continues and says, thus, it is not just in the consumption of this foodstuff of second density that such infringement takes place. We would remind each third density entity that the second density foodstuff in the form of plants also have a type of consciousness that is more likely to be able to blend in a harmonious fashion with the desire of third density entities to see them as foodstuff. This, however, is also enhanced when the third density entity is able to see all food, be it animal or vegetable, as that which is conscious, that which contains the one infinite creator, and that which with a communication needs to be established in some manner, whether it is the saying of a blessing of the food or the asking of the food if it is acceptable to be utilized as food before it is so utilized. I believe our society has lost its connection to all of this, and not as humans, not at the human level, because I see it way too often how people are. It amazes me how people are so loving with plants before they eat them. It's so prevalent still in our society, in our humans, not in our culture, of course, but with humans I see this too often. It's maybe not so in the animal industry, of course, but there is still a relationship that is lost to our culture that was established in the past when eating meat. That relatedness has been lost because of something that I will talk about in a little bit, which is quite obvious. But in any case, Quo is saying here that it took me a second to interpret this, and I urge you to read it because you may have a different interpretation. But when they say that they want to remind us humans that the second density known as plants, they also have a consciousness that is more likely to be able to blend in a harmonious fashion with the desire of humans to eat them, basically. They seem to suggest, and I think evidence shows this, that a majority of our food perhaps should be from plants and not from animals. Again, I think I have the data on my side on this, but it also just makes sense that the majority of our food will come from plants, which again, I know some people may disagree with me, but I see plants at a lesser strata than animals. I'm not saying that they don't have a consciousness, of course. I'm not saying clearly that they're not evolving, and there are certainly different types of plants. Say a sacred tree, as it has been seen in all our ancestry, compared to grass. There is a huge difference there in consciousness. There is a huge intelligence. We can even see it with, say, medicinal plant, which has a huge effect in humans, and an effect in consciousness actually, compared to simple weed that grows in our yard or somewhere else. Of course, weed, as the word itself shows, has also an ancient intelligence in it. Cannabis, I'm talking about here for those who are not following. But you can see, yes, there are differences. And this is why also I believe, I'll throw my 2 cents here too. I believe now, because of the word demand, that's the key word, demand, we are committing sacrilege with the chacruna and the ayahuasca vine to produce this mass medicine that is being produced. I don't know how much it is now, but we run the risk, of course, of now violating and destroying our sacred plants just for the purpose of providing people with a psychedelic experience, which seems sacrilege to me. But then again, that's just my opinion. And so, yes, there is different strata in food, and certain animals may be more acceptable than others. And this is something that our ancestors have seen always. But again, we have lost touch with that reasoning, with that logic, with that emotional connection that we've had with animals. Many animals are not considered to be eaten because of how sacred they are. And this goes not only from India or the Americas, but every other part of the world. In our tribes, we have always had sacred animals not to be consumed as food. The reasoning may be lost to us. Maybe we can still dig into it, but I definitely urge you to check it out if you're interested. Final part of this answer, they say, we realize that most third density entities are unable or unwilling or unaware of such a necessity, that is to bless and to give a word of asking if they could be consumed. And they continue saying, and they move through their daily round of activities with a blindness to this possibility and necessity, as there is blindness to many ways of realizing the spiritual nature of the journey each seeker is upon. This journey of seeking is one which encompasses the entire reality of third density, so that all may be seen eventually as the one infinite creator, and may be communicated with upon that level, so that for whatever reason, the portion of the one creator that you are communicating with is to be used, that there will be a means by which the acceptance of this use by the portion of the creator is achieved. So this last paragraph is simply to wrap up the perception of our society to be blind onto this necessity that we have to communicate with our consciousness. And this is again with the spiritual journey of the being. It's hard, to get into this debate if is meat healthy, is meat unhealthy. I think we must ask ourselves, is my diet healthy? Healthy in the community, not so much for the body, but for the mind and the spirit. Is it a healthy diet to consume this in the way I'm doing it? I have much to say about this, of course, coming as a nutrition expert in these health issues and what to be consumed and the right balance of nutrients and so on. But that would make this podcast double the time. So I want to cover one more part of this question, because Quo says, is there a further query, my brother? And Austin says, yes. He goes on. This is, I believe his name was, let's check, Lanny. Lanny continues and asks a different question here, but related, of course. Says, if it's not too much to ask, I would also like to better understand the spiritual principles involving with attempting to educate others about the injustices of animal agriculture while respecting their free will, since we seem to have a paradox of respecting the free will of the animals, assumed wanting not to be killed, and the free will of a person's supposed right to eat meat. So this question is brilliant, I believe, because it's going to the heart of, okay, now that I am a conscious seeker and I decided that this should be my approach to eating meat, then how do I communicate this with others without infringing on their free will? So Much love and respect to Lanny, who I don't know, but thank you for these questions, Lanny. So what do we do? Do we talk to them? How do we express and inform them? How do we educate them into understanding the injustices of animal industry? And so Quo says, I am Quo and am aware of your query, my brother. The principle of the utilization of animal creatures, shall we say, for producing food is a kind of disregarding of personal rights, as you might say. To attempt to share this kind of information with others that may not be aware of such or may not agree with such is the free will right of an entity seeking to do so. This is in conjunction with any attempt to be of service to others in the matter which attempts to expand or deepen other entities' realization or consciousness of the topic of the use of animal for food, or whatever other topic is desired to be projected to others by one wishing to, shall we say, proselytize. It is an action well done when it is realized that the offering of one's opinion on any topic to another is that which needs to be done without dedication to an outcome that would drive one to push further than the one listening wishes to hear. Thus, the free will of all must be respected by any conscious seeker of truth. To infringe upon the free will of those who unconsciously use animal for food is again an infringement of another kind. I think I read that last part terribly, so I'll just repeat it. To infringe upon the free will of those who unconsciously use animals for food is again an infringement of another kind. So, quite simple. To attempt to educate others should be done with the same, should I say, gnosis? Because there's a deep understanding of how, you see, it's not a guideline. It's something that you feel inside as to how far can you go in telling somebody information that they may feel affected by. And the activists that are into this no animal consumption type of activism, then they would probably help themselves a lot if they could consider this infringement on free will of others, because we have no idea why other people are going through this catalyst of eating whatever their diet is, including of course meat, because there's not only the activism of meat, there is activism against soy and other plant, which again has its merit. There is so much to say about our nutrition paradigm right now on Earth, but how do we go about that is the question. How far can we push our own ideals into somebody else before we start infringing on their free will? Should we even say anything? Well, do we want to is the question. And if you want to, how much do you want to preserve their free will? Can you do it lovingly? Can you do it from a point of simply informing what you feel? These are questions that need to be pondered, of course, by the people who want to do this, who want to explain the injustices of animal agriculture. And this is where, of course, I have my own opinions, and this is, of course, coming from my own understandings of what is the situation. That is the point of all of this. Let's just take a step aside from animal consumption. We'll come back to that. But let's start with our own practices of food. You see, when I was a nutrition coach, I realized that diet used to be a religion for people, meaning that for you, and I'm talking about people who came to me who wanted to change their diet, and what they wanted to do was something different. You see, it's almost, I see the same parallel of people now asking me, how do I kill my ego? How do I transcend my own limitation? How do I manifest the job and everything that I need? You see, what they're trying to do is run away from their own reality and attempting to do that with a escape mechanism. And so people would approach me in the nutrition field and ask me questions about, how do I accomplish this in my body? How do I accomplish this for my health? And so on. And they deliberately held to their own practices, meaning that they wouldn't let go of what they wanted to eat. They simply wanted to know, what can I eat? I used to laugh because the question was so wrong to ask, what can I eat to lose weight? This is one of the classic questions. And it's a laughable question again, because you don't eat anything to lose weight. You stop eating to lose weight. So the question was on its head. But you understand what people are saying. They simply want to know, what can I eat that I'm not eating? Or what should I stop eating? But then when you get into the religious part, when you say to them, well, this is not very beneficial because of different reasons, of course, that becomes very boring if you start talking about metabolism and macronutrients and the utilization of certain nutrients for energy and so on. But it was the same question, and how do I continue to do what I'm doing? How do I enjoy my life? You see, and it's because we are still attached to this. The reason why we eat is not for health. We don't eat because we're hungry either. This is not our experience. We have been bombarded with so much mind-altering substances. And I say this with all the credibility of it. Mind-altering substances present in food that condition us to want to repeat the eating of said food. And so the question should be, how do I rearrange my perception of food so it's no longer a necessity of just, I'm eating because I'm bored, I'm eating because it's fun, I'm eating because there's a party and we should throw huge amount of foods. And we incur into what I call wasting food. Let me just go first at the wasting food of the how much food we actually lose. I believe the ciphers are in the 50% or more in America, in North America, of food produced is actually trashed. So 50% of the food that we're producing, it's actually going to the garbage. It's being fed to fungus and bacteria. To what end? Why are we producing why are we allowing all this consciousness to thrive and come out to be slaughtered for food if we're not going to eat it? There's something inherently wrong with the way we approach food. We're not eating because it's healthy or because we need to eat because it's a necessity. We're eating for a myriad of reasons, and that should be addressed individually in each and one of us as to see why am I eating and what am I eating may come next. The other way in which we're wasting food is that sometimes we just eat food that we don't need, and so we're wasting food in ourselves and we're carrying all this extra weight for no reason. Carrying extra weight should be a catalyst for us to realize that maybe we're consuming more food than we need to. I mean, it's an obvious thing. It's so obvious. And it's such a huge sign for us to realize and say, okay, what is the matter with me? Why am I so emotionally attached to food that I need to eat this much? So this is another ways of food, which is, again, nothing against, carrying extra couple of pounds here and there, but it really begs the question, why am I eating? Why do I continue to eat? Is food supposed to be a fun part of my reality? Is it supposed to be entertainment? What is it supposed to be? And now let's go to the meat consumption, which is abysmal at this point. You see, let's go into history again. and revisit the fact that over thousands of years, we didn't eat meat the way we eat now. Sure, this is why the argument goes back and forth. Yes, we've always eaten meat, it's an evolutionary thing. Oh no, we're not. We're herbivores, we're omnivores, we're carnivores. This is such a superficial conversation about the necessity of eating meat. Yes, we humans could eat anything. We would eat anything. That's what characterizes us. We adapt. We have the most varied food in the whole planet of all animals. So there's no discussion there, period. We can and should eat meat if the necessity arises, I'm sure. But let's just take into account the fact that in the past, meat was very expensive. Meat was not a common food item in the plebeian table. It was only for royalty or the rulers of the society, whether that be the tribe leader or the governors or the emperors or the consuls or anybody else. So these privileged people could consume meat, clearly because raising cattle was not simple, was not an easy thing, and it was reserved for a few. It was very expensive. So even back when we were quite distorted as a society, it was rightly expensive. So we didn't eat meat that much. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning this is because this actually was the case for thousands of years until something happened on our planet, which is called the industry. When the industry came and it realized that us plebeians didn't eat meat, they said, well, don't you want to feel like a royal person? Don't you want to feel like you're in a high status? And so, of course, the industry created the ability to produce mass production of meat. And so, of course, everybody started eating meat. Now, look at the charts that we have now. I don't have to put another chart up on the internet to see at this point how meat consumption has gone extremely overboard. Because, again, the word is demand. And when there is demand, there is supply. People started eating meat because it was fashionable. Just like we started using deodorant and other cosmetics and painting our faces because we have to look nice and we have to go to the gym to look like this. We started buying into this whole propaganda of how we should be because we want to look like royalty. We want to look, this is a prevalent aspect in our society. We still want to look like those royals. We still want to look like the monarchs who had all this jewelry and all this clothing that was vibrant, and we just want that. And so the industry, of course, has found so many different ways and to create this synthetic form of production for us to continue to consume, whether it be food or apparel. It doesn't matter, or detergents and so on. All of this is just part of that. So this is what's driving the meat consumption. It is going to the extreme of producing a lot of meat. And in the process, of course, we are not even taking into consideration that plants and animals are different, that air and food is different. You see, we are going away from the understanding of consciousness as a driving force in our planet and how we relate to this consciousness. So I often say, if I could look at an animal in the eyes and kill it for food, then possibly I could eat it. If I can't do that, then I just don't feel like eating it, because it's like looking at another human in the eyes and just stabbing it because I'm hungry. I think there are better ways. Speaking of better ways, let me not finish this episode without talking about meat substitutes. My God, as a nutritionist, I can say that the meat substitutes can be such a disgrace to nutrition. And may I say that it is another distraction of the childish approach to food when people decide that they're not going to eat meat again, and they go to meat substitutes. Why on earth would you want to eat something as synthetic as a substitute for meat? Look at the ingredients, look at what you're eating, please. Again, I know I sound like I'm giving advice here, but please, just a suggestion. Look at what you're eating, because I even believe that meat substitutes are becoming the same as meat in terms of energy, in terms of what it provides to you, in terms of nutrition. What is it giving to you? It's a scary thing to see what the industry can do, mutating plants now to look like meat. It's simply awful to think of all the different things that the industry would do to simply satisfy the demand of people, because it's not fashionable to eat meat anymore, so I need to chew on something that feels like meat. Consciously, I think you're still chewing the same meat, but you're just disguising it with plants because plants are supposed to be healthier. There's so much to say about nutrition that I could not stop today, but we must stop at some point, and at least I want to tell you that all that I would suggest is that you simply begin with your self-consciousness, with yourself. Start there. Forget about the animals, forget about other humans. Start with yourself. Extrapolate, like I said, to other humans and see yourself in other humans. And then the rest will resolve itself. We work with mirrors, that is ourselves. And I believe this is the only way in which you can draw that line into which you want to eat, what you want to eat, and how you want to eat it, and what approach you have, what type of gratitude you have towards the food that you're consuming every day. And it all starts with the self. We cannot start with the outside world, even though it's very tempting, especially in these days. But we have to go inside to begin the journey outwards. So with that, I come to the end of this episode. I am grateful to be able to share this information with you. I would like to know what you think. Leave me comments here in the YouTube section. Unfortunately, those who listen in the podcast platforms don't have comments, so you have to come to YouTube, share with me, talk to me. What do you think? What do you eat? What are your thoughts? I would love to know. So thank you again for listening. I love you, my other self. We resonate with each other in this vibration. And I'll catch you on the next one.